You are now listening to Wake Up Wednesdays.
Wakey, wakey.
Giving you your weekly cup of truth in the pursuit of life and liberty. Here's your host, Stephanie Action Jackson.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's Wake Up Wednesday with me, your host, Stephanie Jackson. I hope everybody's doing good today. I have a great show lined up for you. First, I want to apologize about last week. My guest didn't follow through, but it was going to be so awesome. And I'm not really sure what happened, but she is a operating nurse. So, but moving on from that, I hope that we will be able, Helen, to reschedule that because I really want to talk about the aerosolization of poop because it's spreading COVID-19 like wildfire and people don't know it. And lots of diseases are spread that way. But before we get into today's episode, let's get into the news. And it's back to me, guys. So this morning I want to talk about Greg Abbott. When I went to sleep last night, Twitter was going crazy about Greg Abbott. And what's really, we need to take a minute and pray for the people down in Texas who don't have any heat, who are freezing. Like, that's just unacceptable, especially with the storm and the weather that they've had. But I guess everybody's really, really angry with Greg Abbott right now, but he came out last night and said that this is exactly what would happen with green energy, with all the windmills freezing up and so on and so forth. And so I thought, wow, for all these people to be so upset with him, and perhaps 90% of the entire state relies on this electric grid. But I'm finding out that the issue now this morning is actually gas. It's not even the electric issue. So more to come on that, but that's what I'm understanding now. But let's get heat to the people of Texas. Like, that's the number one thing here right now, especially in the freezing temperatures that they have. It's just crazy. Next, I want to talk about Rachel May, senator here in New York, Onondaga, Madison County. I wrote a letter to the Syracuse.com op-ed, and I'm going to just share it here. I actually got some information from the New York Libertarian discussion on Facebook, and I went ahead and made some changes, but I sent it in. But I want to share it with you guys here because, share it far and wide if you guys can. Get on Facebook. But what I wrote was, State Senator Rachel May recently called for the New York State legislature to revoke the unlimited emergency powers it granted to King Cuomo to fight the COVID-19 pandemic over His Majesty's misreporting of COVID death numbers in nursing homes. While some may applaud the senator's stance, May would rather you not know that she in fact voted to give Cuomo these unlimited executive powers that have wrought havoc across the state, particularly in the Onondaga and Madison counties. That is right. May voted with fellow Democrats and Republicans to abandon her responsibilities as legislatures, a job that pays six figures, well above the average salary of state residents, and give King Cuomo unlimited powers. May is responsible for the permanent closure of many businesses and the destruction of thousands of livelihoods throughout. She, along with her fellow lawmakers, are responsible for the ever-growing exodus of residents to states that do not have the draconian restrictions that not only fail to stop the spread of COVID, but also plunge the state further towards economic ruin. Yes, May does achieve small victories for her district, but she backstabs us when we need her most, like when she, as head of the Aging Committee, ignored her constituents' plea for the deaths of their families, all of this time for the entire pandemic. When given the opportunity to launch a bipartisan investigation into the matter, she voted no on the motion, stating, "I don't see the point." While May calls for the revocation of Cuomo's unlimited powers, we should make sure that she's not riding some moral high horse by demanding answers as to why she voted to give Cuomo these powers in the first place. Rachel May also needs to be investigated on the handling of this pandemic. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you guys are thinking about. I want to know. Make sure you share that information. One last thing I'm going to get into is Elise. I see that Elise Stefanik is calling the Department of Justice to do an investigation into Cuomo. And, there's a lot of calls for investigations, but they don't always go anywhere. But there's several things that Andrew Cuomo needs to be investigated on. The nursing homes certainly should be, that's the can of worms. That opens up Pandora's box, because once he started sending sick people back there and ignoring people, and people like Rachel May and his henchmen who allowed this to happen, who stayed complicit in it, this is criminal. We can get into, I made a post this week about hydrochloroquine. That was banned. Physicians were not allowed to prescribe it out. And here in New York, that was the case. And now we just see that, it is working. It is good. And what about the doctors who were censored for saying so, who were trying to save people's lives? And it's more than that. We're seeing things overturned as them being unconstitutional with the closing of businesses and restricting businesses. So we really need to make sure that not only is Andrew Cuomo investigated, but personally, he needs to be in prison, along with many, many legislators who voted to give him this power and really, really stayed complicit in all of this. So, Amazon is hiring for $15 an hour, and the minimum wage frenzy is going crazy. Let me tell you guys something. $15 an hour in today's world, it's probably not the best. Small business owners, do you know? How many? Honestly, how many small business owners do you know? Or have you ever had a conversation with a friend of yours who owns a business that actually has employees? Not, your entrepreneur friends who are selling stuff out of catalogs. Friends who actually have a business and they have a couple of employees. Not a single one could afford right now, especially coming off this pandemic, to pay their employees $50 an hour. And if they did, they would have to make serious, drastic cuts in another form or fashion. Here's the catcher. Well, Amazon is setting the precedent of $15 an hour. Those people are only going to be hired part-time for 4-hour shifts. So it's a lot easier to cut corners when you're only a part-time employee and things on you. Small businesses usually will carry insurance and other things that they must have on you in order for you to work full-time. So that needs to be brought into the conversation as well, because I don't think that there's very many businesses that aren't struggling right now coming off of the pandemic. So to have to force them to now pay a minimum wage, I question and I challenge you to think about this, right? And I hear everyone's side on this, like everyone deserves a living wage. But as we make that wage go up, we're going to see businesses. And what I really think that this is just implementing is universal basic income. I think that's coming. I think it's inevitable that, that is where we're headed next. Again, leave me comments, send me messages. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to get back into it with our guests. We're going to be talking a lot about Second Amendment rights coming up here soon. So let me just take this quick break, and we will be right back.
Visit www.jgfamilyconsulting.com for courses to enrich you and your children to be the difference you want to see in the world by using Scripture as our guide.
James Ostrowski is a trial and appellate lawyer and author from Buffalo, New York. He graduated from St. Joseph's Collegiate Institute in 1975 and obtained a degree in philosophy from the State University of New York at Buffalo in 1980. He graduated from Brooklyn Law School in 1983. In law school, he was writing assistant to Dean David Traeger, later a federal judge in the Eastern District of New York. He was a member of the Moot Court Honor Society and the International Law Moot Court team. He served as vice chair of the Law Reform Committee of the New York County Lawyers Association and wrote 2 widely quoted reports critical of the law enforcement approach to the drug problem. He was chair of the Human Rights Committee, Erie County Bar Association. He has written a number of scholarly articles on the law and subjects ranging from drug policy to the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. His articles have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Buffalo News, Cleveland, Plain Dealer, and Legislative Gazette. His policy studies have been published by the Hoover Institution, the Ludwig von Mises Institute, and the Cato Institute in Washington, D.C. His articles have been used as course materials at numerous colleges, including Brown, Rutgers, and Stanford. He is the author of Political Class Dismissed, 2004, Government Schools Are Bad for Your Kids, 2009, and Direct Citizen Action, 2010. Presently, he is an adjunct scholar at the Ludwig von Mises Institute and a columnist for LeeRockwell.com. He and his wife, Amy, live in North Buffalo with their 2 children, Anna and Will. He's a longtime youth baseball and basketball coach. So Jim Ostrowski is going to be our guest this morning. Sorry, I'm not all the way with it this morning. I haven't had enough coffee yet. How are you guys? I have my free cup that I got that I use every single morning. So, where was I? I just got distracted. But Jim is going to be talking about his SCOTUS case this morning. And, I'm just really excited to bring him on. He's done so much work. And I've been a fan of his work long before this. And I think all of you guys who are tuning in from the Second Amendment groups, I'm real excited to get into this. So, Jim, are you there?
I'm here. How you doing, Stephanie?
Good.
Thanks for having me on.
You bet. So I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the updates that I saw within the last week or 2 on the SCOTUS case. And I saw that you guys did a press release out in Erie County. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Sure. It's a long story. I'll try to make it brief. So I wrote an article 25 years ago, and I said the Second Amendment protects an individual right to bear arms to deter government tyranny. I've kind of believed that for many, many decades. And then Heller came along in 2008 and shocked the legal community, and which the legal community did not believe that there was any individual right to bear arms. They believed it was an obsolete thing related to militias, and militias, we don't have militias anymore. So, but the Supreme Court said, yes, it is an individual right to bear arms. And that was a 5-4 decision. The 4, including some people who are still there, would have held that there was no right at all, just as the legal establishment said. So around that time, I took a look at I had gotten the New York pistol permit application because in those days I was doing criminal work. I was going into some pretty hairy situations, basically doing my own investigation. So I looked at it. I said, I'm not filling this out. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to get references and go through all this nonsense for what I think is an individual right. So to this very day, I don't have a pistol permit. But after Heller and then McDonald came along, I said, well, let's challenge this statute. I got a bunch of people together to do it. And then we were about to pull the trigger on it, pun intended, I guess. And then somebody found out there was a case downstate. And this is a good lesson. Like, don't just rely on one tactic or one strategy or one lawsuit. But that convinced them to sort of not spend their money and let somebody else spend their money. That case turned out to be the Kalkalski case. And I'm not one to cite a lot of cases, but it's kind of important. So that case, I just dropped it and went on to the next thing. So after the SAFE Act came along, I was super busy and there was a lot of rallies in Buffalo. And I said, well, what can I do to help this fight? And I said, well, whatever happened to that Kalkalski case? And I looked it up, found out that they only raised one issue. I raised 12 in our case, and I was going to back many years ago. And it was the proper cause to carry in public. And they lost, and then they lost to the Second Circuit, and then Scalia died, and they decided not to go higher than that. So again, after the SAFE Act, I said, well, let's get the band back together again and let's file this challenge. So we did in like 2015. And the case has wound its way through the courts for reasons that are not my responsibility. I'm certainly capable of litigating slowly since I'm always up against big firms and underfunded. But in this case, it was really the district judge that took a long time to rule. And then we did get up to the Second Circuit after we lost, which I expected us to lose, and wanted to get up into the higher court. So we went up to the Second Circuit, but the Supreme Court had taken what we call the NYSERPA case. And it was funny going up there. We drove all night to get there, had about 7 cups of coffee in Jersey City, Steve Filano and I. It was freezing cold in Manhattan that day. I will never forget that, because Manhattan's not, I was in New York for 8 years. Manhattan is usually a little warmer than Buffalo. It was so cold. We walked all the way to the courthouse from the PATH train, World Trade Center, and got to the court. And somehow the oral argument went pretty well, but they were treating us like royalty because they thought that we had 5 votes in our hip pocket in the Supreme Court. Well, and so you can listen to the oral argument online. It's actually pretty interesting. So
where would I find that online?
If you go to the Second Circuit and go back to February of, I guess, 19, and look for Libertarian Party of Erie County, you can listen to the actual oral argument. And I'll get into a little bit what happened there. So, but NYSERPA was mooted, and in other words, there was no ruling on the merits, and we could talk about strategies, and it's interesting, but I just want to get the chronology out. So, the Attorney General, our friend Letitia James, the far left wing Attorney General of New York, she then wrote a letter to the court and said, well, looks like we win. The precedent is that we win in the Second Circuit with no Supreme Court ruling. So I wrote back, I'm not really what you would call a shrinking violet. I'm extremely aggressive in my approach, either in litigation or in politics or political strategy. And I said, no, you don't win. We need to rebrief the case. Why? Because the lockdown, the illegal lockdown, shows that everything we said in our papers was true, that we can have government, the government tyranny is a threat. There's been all sorts of violence in the streets with Antifa and so on, and the police are not protecting us. They're not capable of protecting us, and they don't really apparently care to protect us. And I pointed out that there was a riot in Buffalo where the federal courthouse was damaged. We have this extremely expensive Constitution embossed glass on the new federal courthouse in Buffalo. And I went down there. It's funny how journalism is dead. So I went down there myself and I looked at it the day after and I said, wow, the glass is cracked, which was not even reported in the media. So, but I kind of threw that in the face of the Second Circuit. And I said, no, we need to, let's rebrief this whole thing. So, excuse me. So they, of course, declined, and a judge who said nothing during the oral argument, a Democratic appointed judge, issued the decision. They ignored most of our arguments. And then, so what happened then was that we could have gone directly to the Supreme Court, or we could have done a motion for a rehearing. And I decided to do a motion for a rehearing. I just had a, gut feeling. So by the time the rehearing was denied, which I knew it would be denied, we had a different Supreme Court. We had Coney Barrett on the court. Wow. So she's very solid on the Second Amendment. So then we decided to file our petition for certiorari. I really highly recommend that you read it. It's on my Facebook page. If you go to my Scribd account, it should be there. And if somebody knows how to post PDFs for free somewhere, let me know. Or I can email it out to people if they send me an email. So the difference between our brief and the other law firms, the big law firms, is that we take no prisoners. It's no apologies. It's unapologetic, in your face, no namby-pamby, hyper-technical, legal nonsense. I won't swear on your show because I don't know you well enough. But if you listen to my podcast, trial lawyers swear like sailors. So that's the difference between our approach and a lot of the other firms. We make the government tyranny argument. In fact, it's interesting because we had a firm volunteer to help us out. And I took their brief and I merged it with my brief and I sent it back to them. And they said, well, we don't want to do the government tyranny argument. And so my philosophy is, if you're not doing the government tyranny argument, you're basically holstering most of your weapons, because then it becomes this really silly and dishonest look at the gun issue, which assumes that the Second Amendment is this very annoying thing, and people, I suppose, have a right to shoot a burglar if a burglar comes in their house. That's not the point. But if that was the point, now what happens? Now, all the foundations, we're up against Bloomberg, by the way, Gabby Giffords, a foundation funded by billionaires, both of them. We're up against the Attorney General, the biggest law office in the state, with an unlimited budget.
It's almost like going up against Big Pharma. They're all lobbied in together.
Yeah.
All the money.
Yeah. So what they do is they throw in all these phony studies done by phony academics, which are, all these studies are nonsense.
They're paid
But the judges get lost in the weeds of, is there really proof that having a gun in the home is good for self-defense? All this stuff is beside the point. And I wrote in the process of all this, I wrote a book called The Second Amendment Works, which is on Amazon, almost giving it away. And it's free online at Steve Filano's site, 2anys.com.
What's the name of that book, Jim? The
Second Amendment Works. And the subtitle is A Primer on How to Defend Our Most Important Right. We point out in that book, we did, I guess I should say I did, but we did original research to show that if you understand that the purpose of the Second Amendment is to deter government tyranny, that then you look at the empirical evidence. It works. It's worked. We haven't had a coup d'etat in the United States. And this notion about January 6th is such nonsense, silly. There's never been a coup d'etat in the United States, to my knowledge. And then when you look at the countries that have frequent coup d'etats, they have very low rates of civilian gun ownership. And there's a whole set of empirical data points that prove in other areas of life that the Second Amendment works. For example, we don't have the mass shooting of demonstrators in this country. We had Kent State. We had another shooting in the 60s, but we've had people like mowed down by machine guns in these totalitarian countries where people don't have the right to bear arms. The instability of democratic states, and I cite Hitler, Germany under Hitler, Mussolini, Italy under Mussolini, where you have these emergency declarations, and we can get into those as well. There's a whole, I'm not going to summarize the book, but the empirical case for the Second Amendment is extremely solid once you understand what the purpose of it is. If you're talking about burglaries, yeah, I mean, I can make that argument, but it's a weak argument. So the big law firms and the big gun groups have chosen to sort of holster most of their weapons and not offend anybody. And they're very sort of overly narrowly strategic in winning these tiny little cases. Well, they won 2 cases. And ever since then, we've been getting killed. So that's why we're taking this bold, aggressive approach. So we filed the petition, waiting for the Supreme Court to docket it. And we're hoping to get some amicus curiae support. There'll probably be some amicus curiae briefs against us. And then it'll be up to, we need, 4 votes to get accepted into the court.
Okay. So one thing, not wanting to back up just a little bit, they don't want the tyranny argument, right? But what do we actually have right now that's occurring with these executive powers that some of these governors have? And especially, it's really let's be honest, it's the Democrat controlled states and cities that want the gun control and want the guns out of our hands. It's not, that's really where the problem lies. But I won't take it completely out of the Republicans' hands because they push back and they allow it. They're complicit in it. However, aren't we in a tyrannical situation right exactly now?
Yeah, I mean, you make an interesting point, and here's how I would distinguish it from the examples I'm talking about in the book. I mean, we're not having the classic hallmarks of the sort of 20th century totalitarian state, which is that there's a knock on the door in the middle of the night, you go off to a concentration camp and never to be seen again. We're not having that level. We're not having, as I said, coups d'etat. And really, the situation with the lockdown is shown, I guess, if you believe the election results, which, we that's another show.
We don't.
A lot of people supported the lockdown initially. And in New York here, a lot of people still support the lockdown. I see people wearing these masks outside. I'm a big walker and jogger occasionally, and people are constantly stepping off the sidewalk when they see me coming. I mean, obviously they're probably somebody with a mask outside. They're probably a Democrat. A mask in the car driving by themselves. They're probably a Democrat. I call this proto-totalitarianism. In other words, we're on the way to it, and gun possession. Look, I mean, gun possession isn't a panacea. Like, we have a lot of dumb policies that destroy our liberty, even though we're heavily armed. Well, I mean, a lot of it is that let's get right into it. I mean, how many gun owners will pick up a gun to oppose Social Security when they may be getting a government check from Social Security? So you've got to make some fine distinctions that a civilian population that's well armed has the capacity to resist a tyrannical government that they want to resist. And the tyranny of the lockdown is not opposed by a sufficient number of people that even bring guns into play. And by the way, I have a dove with the olive branch on the cover of the book. The Second Amendment deters tyranny peacefully. This is an incredibly important point because they think, the crazy left wing thinks that like people like me want to just, a politician makes a statement at a local town hall meeting and we take out our gun and shoot them. That's like totally idiotic and moronic, as pretty much everything coming out of the left is, and increasingly deranged, actually, mentally deranged. But no, the Second Amendment deters tyranny peacefully. We don't even have to do anything. It's just that, let's say somebody wanted to do an actual coup d'etat and take Trump out of the White House, a year ago. Well, the next day, 5 million people would have been surrounded DC with assault rifles and said, I think you're going to have to put Mr. Trump back in office. Now, the generals, the deep state generals and so on, the CIA, they all know this. They're spying on us all the time. They know there's people out there with the right provocation, not the stupid January 6th riot. We don't even know why there was a riot. Not that. They know that with sufficient provocation, there will be armed resistance. And that's really important. And in my book, Direct Citizen Action, by the way, it's really important to have, the old phone line between the president and the Kremlin that was in the movie Fail Safe before your time, but you should see it. It's good to have an open line of communication from us to the deep state. And, they monitor everything we talk about. So to let the deep state know what will trigger active resistance, I listed all the things in my book. Oh, nice. And that includes violation of free speech or the right of public assembly, mass confiscation of firearms, banning public schools, checkpoints, routine checkpoints, internal passport, these types of things. If they ban public assembly, it's game, set, match. That we're actually fighting that in the courts right now. But like, if there's certain things that would trigger active resistance, and they should know that because we don't want to do that. We don't want it to go to that point. And
let me ask you something. I noticed at the beginning of the pandemic, because, some people would accuse me of being a conspiracy theorist. Yeah. But I defend myself in saying that I'm just open-minded. I say, give me all the information on every side, give it all to me. I can dig, research, pick out what path or what I'll do myself. And so one of the things that kind of go back to what you're saying, and with us having this open line, right now, when I get what you're saying with what goes back to my question with tyranny, but at the beginning of the pandemic, I was freaked out because all the first 6 months of the pandemic, up until February of this year, the United Nations was hiring for disarmament officers in New York State. Why would they be doing such a thing like that? Then we take Andrew Cuomo, who is responsible for more than 10,000 deaths in nursing homes and institutions. We deny people life-saving drugs. When you start getting into the tens of thousands of people who died in less than a year's period of time, and you have plans in place what is a disarmament officer? Why were you hiring for them in New York State? And so these are some questions I have that Don't they sort of fit the bill for tyranny?
Well, we have, as they say, proto totalitarianism. We're on the road towards totalitarianism, and there's some pushback. There's the Supreme Court said that the restrictions on houses of worship are unconstitutional. In fact, we're litigating that in Rochester. So we believe we're going to win that point. And, we may have some developments on that soon in our federal case, excuse me, Lewis v. Cuomo. But again, if people, there's a tremendous amount of acquiescence to the lockdown because look, if you look at my book, Progressivism, you have to understand that the progressive state's power is based on fear. Progressivism is an ideology of fear. It's not rational. That's why, if you ever tried to talk to, and by progressive, by the way, I don't mean leftist. There's one of the themes of my work, if you look at my podcast, constantly trying to explain or clarify words. So when I use progressive, I mean somebody who believes there's a big government solution to all human problems. And there's many Republicans who are progressives, by the way, like Mitch McConnell, for example. He's a right-wing progressive, as Steve Filano would say. A leftist is something different. A leftist is a fanatical proponent of equality. So, and that's a different topic. And frankly, I'm writing a book about it, but it's not done yet. So the progressivism is an ideology of fear. People are afraid, therefore let's pass a law, and therefore people will feel better about their lives. So this fear mongering has been going on, as far back as Roosevelt, like the four freedoms, freedom from fear. And so they primed the American population to be afraid. It's like Pavlov's dog. We're going to make you afraid, and you're going to give us more power. And so the American people were primed for this a long time ago. I have 90% of the American people as some sort of progressives, as opposed to, and the opposite of progressive would be libertarian. And Ron Paul got, I think, 11% of the vote when he ran for president. So optimistically, 10% of the American people are libertarian in some sense. It's actually, you talk about hardcore, it's lower than that. So most of Americans are actually grown up as good little progressive sheep, if you will. Their grandparents were born into a progressive era. It's in the water. It's in the air. We don't even think about it. That's why I wrote the book.
I'll tell you my story, Jim. I'm first generation American. My father breaks my heart. He probably isn't listening, thank God. But thinking about what my grandparents went through. My grandfather was on his own at 14 years old, taking care of his baby brother. His parents were killed in Ukraine. Scooped up, brought to Auschwitz, worked as a migrant farmer, met my grandmother, got married. They were in Germany in a camp. And my father was born in Germany, and then they came through Boston and settled in Auburn, New York. Mm-hmm. My grandfather worked in a rope factory, gave my father this wonderful American life. And he is so progressive, so Democrat. He could not stand me this year. Politics came in between us. Mm-hmm. And I literally feel my grandparents' souls like crying out to me at what is occurring. And I can't even reach my own father that it's mm-hmm. that bad, And so I get what you're saying of how they were raised, because it's I can't believe that his own parents struggled that and he can't see what's coming. It blows my mind.
Well, there's these every family has these conflicts now. And if you look at the roots of it, if you look at progressivism as a mindset and leftism, and they're often conjoined in the same person, as we all know, but they're different mindsets. You could be, well, let's put it this way. You can be a progressive and not be a leftist. You can believe in you can be like Nelson Rockefeller. He was a progressive. He wasn't a leftist. I mean, he didn't believe that something wrong with having $1 billion, but he was a progressive. He believed in big government. He built up State University of New York, for example. But if you look at progressivism and understand what it is, progressivism is a non-rational mindset. You know, it's not based on facts or logic. So, and this is why I wrote my book, because I've been talking to progressives. You know, people, you know, as a libertarian, people might say, what do you know about progressivism? What are you talking about? What don't I know? I mean, I grew up in a progressive state. I went to UB, Buffalo University, is progressive. I went to Brooklyn Law School, it's progressive, and so on. I lived in Brooklyn for 4 years. I mean, I've been around progressives all my life. So my whole life has been a laboratory in studying progressives. And what I find is that when you try to take the libertarian approach of sort of Aristotelian logic and scientific fact, and you try to talk to these people, it's like talking to a wall. And they basically don't have an argument, because progressivism is not an argument. It's an emotional mindset. And they get angry and walk away. And when you talk to a leftist, it's even, you know, it's even worse than that. Leftism is basically the hatred of people who are better than you, masquerading as an ideology of equality and so on. And you'd be interested, you'll love my book when I finally get the darn thing published. The reason why, you know, in other words, if you have a theory of leftism, it better explain the violence. Well, my theory does, because when you are unhappy, when you're miserably unhappy, like your typical leftist is, and you've convinced yourself that the reason you're unhappy is that guy over there, he's got 3 cars in his garage. He's the one that's making me miserable. And there's no doubt the person's miserable. You can develop that sort of, and then you create an ideology out of that says that, well, you know, that guy is taking your surplus labor. He's stealing your labor, and I'm going to go chop his head off. Well, I've then explained leftism. I shouldn't even do this, because nobody's going to buy my darn book now.
Everybody gets Jim's books on Amazon.
You're going to love
all
it.
under $10, and most of them are under $5. It's just worth the read. And I actually need to do the same. I need to get a few of them that I didn't hear of. That you know, I saw the one that we also. Oh, you can get one for free, guys. I'm going to stick that up here too, real quick. Go to 2ANYS and you can get the Second Amendment Works for free. And also, let me hide these out. And you can follow Jim at thelibertymovement.org. He has Twitter, Jim Ostrowski, and Facebook. Just look him up by his name. And also, he has a podcast on YouTube called The Liberty Movement. So definitely go to thelibertymovement.org and get behind Jim Ostrowski, who is fighting for our Second Amendment rights here in New York State.
I just want to point out that the website's down at the moment, and it's not really. It's been up and down. We're working on it, technical stuff, but it's not quite ready for prime time. But in the coming year, later on in the year, we'll have tremendous amount of material on there. And the podcast, I'm trying to build up a podcast. I'm using YouTube until they kick me off, probably, just to sort of practice. But I have 18 podcasts up, and it's Liberty Moving is the name of it, and that's another website. I'm going to be. I've ranked the 100 freest counties, and that website will be up in a week or two. And I'm actually going to rank all 3,000 counties in the United States, so people can know where the heck to move to escape from these tyrannical states like New York.
Yeah, that would be great. Like I said, I've been thinking, like, I have my stuff planned out. Like, if it gets, where do I draw the line? I think mandatory vaccinations, when they're ready to do something like that, I'm
Yeah.
out of here first thing smoking with my kids. However, in giving that thought, I mean, there's so much research that goes behind that. And I've done a lot of research. So in my consulting work, I actually spend a lot of time with families who are looking to leave. And I say, before I can give you any information, what's the most important things for you that you want, because I can give you a good place to go now, but I can't say what will happen at the next election. So I don't want to, send people off. And when I saw that Steve was going to be running for sheriff, I saw your case, and I'm like, I think if I'm going to be in New York, I might have to get to Erie County, because at least there's people fighting over there.
Well, we've had some, Steve and Dwayne Whitmer and I have had some discussions about moving, because, my plan is to exit the state at the right time.
Right?
And they're sticking it out. But these are subjective judgments. But one of the reasons I'm putting data on this decision is that, reputation's a funny thing. Like it's people call me sometimes and think I do a certain type of law practice, and like, I don't even have a clue. Reputations are very imperfect. And that's true with state. Excuse me. That's true with states as well. So I see a lot of people they want to move to Texas, and I say, well, that's going to be a blue state in a few years. And they look at me like, oh, wow, I never thought of that. So my ranking of counties actually factors in political voting trends, which I believe is the only one that does. So now you can't really, in this world, prepare 10 years ahead, and maybe not even 5 years ahead. But my formula will give you a tremendous advantage. And then, you have to weigh things out, weather and so on. But I have a pretty interesting formula algorithm for ranking these states. So hopefully when I figure out the technical bugs, I'll get the thing back up and running. And I'm not really promoting it at this point, but we'll get it back up online. And then later in the year, I'm moving out of law practice and into, political stuff. So, and writing and podcasting. So I'll be doing a lot more stuff as the year goes on.
Well, great. I'm so thankful that you are a part of this morning with us. And I thank you so much for everything that you've done for all the years that you've been writing these books. And really just, it's tireless, right? You put in so much effort, so much time into the facts and the findings. And it's so hard when it falls on deaf ears.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
The more opportunities that we have to talk, I want this, and so that's part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. When I ran for state assembly, some of the things that you talk about, the censorship, the sabotage, the things that I've learned. I actually, I never voted, guys, and everybody listening. I actually never voted in my life. It wasn't something that, with my background, it wasn't obviously something that was emphasized or very, being from another country. It was just, my grandparents left, they passed when I was young, when I was, maybe 10. And so I just didn't have anybody really telling me how the importance of my vote was. And go figure that the year I decide to vote, I wonder if my vote was even important or if it was rigged. So I registered to vote, obviously, because I'm running for office. I did it strategically, not based on really parties, because honestly, I still don't fit into a political party. I'm totally think for myself. I don't force my thoughts and beliefs on other people. I don't, I say, do what you want to do and I'll leave you alone, and I'm going to do what I want to do and leave me alone. And as long as we're not hurting each other, then that's that. But I do believe in consequences for actions and so on and so forth. But let me not give a political pitch. Sorry, guys. I'm getting off topic. But the point is that I felt that I needed to, do this. And I had all these experiences to know in the very first year that I went, I mean, I think I was like really placed here for a real reason because I need to keep talking. I have the platform of people who are supporting of me. And I need to just build on that and grow on that. But I'm not going to shy away from the censorship, from being targeted by just a figure of our imaginations, Antifa, that I have photographs of who showed up at a Patriot March that I had, which got me censored off of Facebook in the first place. So
Did you say
I don't know how
Antifa?
they're just a figment of my imagination, but they exist in photographs too.
Did you say Antifa?
Yeah.
They're after me too.
Oh man,
Yeah.
Look at Jim. I mean, I held a Patriot March, and you'll get a kick out of this one. Back in October, right? And it was about our constitutional rights and our freedoms and opening up our churches. And half of the people who attended, out of the 50 to 100 people, were people of color. So when Antifa arrived at my Patriot March, which got me censored off of Facebook, okay?
Wow.
Censored, completely removed. And it said it couldn't be reversed, okay? I had this when Antifa, they were about 50 college kids, white college kids from SU, who sat outside in all black and riot gear outside of the fence while we were inside of the park playing live music, dancing, having speeches, and I don't think that they knew what to do because half of the people at the Patriot March were African American and they were all white on the outside of the fence. So it was like they just couldn't quite mesh or mingle to cause the friction that they were looking to cause by saying that I'm some racist or something, with me. And that's the same thing that happens with me politically. So I did run as a Republican. I got the conservative and libertarian endorsements. And then after how the Republican Party did me and this whole country, I dropped them like a bad habit. And I am now the invisible in New York State other libertarian party because there's no other alternative. If I'm going to be about our freedoms and our rights all of the time, then this is where I'm at. There's no other option. The GOP cannot represent me right now. I would love it if they got their crap together, but the fact of the matter is that they're not. They're complicit in so much of this that I cannot be a part of that.
Yeah, the GOP is basically a bunch of grifters. I entered the GOP like in the late 80s, only to move them in a libertarian direction. And then when I saw what they did to Ron Paul, I was his attorney in New York State when he ran for when he ran for president. When I saw what they did to Ron Paul, I made a decision. It's like I'm getting out, but I just procrastinated. And then when Larry Sharpe got the LP on the ballot, I went down and registered, and I put my registration card on Facebook, and everybody went crazy. It was like, wow, it became a big deal. I was like, yeah, I mean, I didn't want to be associated with the GOP anymore. It had nothing to do with Trump, by the way. It was pre-Trump. This is just a useless grifting organization, which if you read Progressivism, by the way, a primer, that's my best-selling book. There's a lot in there that's not in the title. And there's an analysis of the Republican Party and how they maintain power, which is basically, long story short, they villainize Democratic personalities, not programs, not philosophy, not ideas, personalities. They're always making the rank and file, like Pavlov's dog, hate Bill Clinton, hate Hillary, hate Obama, hate Michelle. Now it's hate Pelosi. What about hating their ideas and their programs and their policy? Oh, no, because we might lose an election and have to go back to the insurance company or the law firm that we worked at, and we would rather grift off the taxpayer and become a lobbyist later. So I got the GOP scam like down pat. I've been in one of the things you get, in my books or podcasts. I've been in politics since I was a boy. I've seen it all. I've done it all, and you can't con me. You just can't con me. I know everybody's scam before they even start talking to me.
What do you mean, you racist boomer? Like, that's all it is. It's like in the political spectrum today, it's like everybody's having a mental breakdown for you believe in anything different outside of their ideologies. They're going to call you names. They're going to accuse you of being everything that you're not. And at first, a year ago, that was like, whoa, that's a lot to digest and take. And now it's like I've got the thickest skin you can imagine. And I actually have a tolerance and a patience and to be able to see past those people who are that way, that just become unhinged, to be able to have these conversations.
I mean, the whole country's going crazy under this lockdown, but particularly the left. I mean, I pointed out on Facebook yesterday that Trump got impeached for giving a speech, which actually, if you read the articles of impeachment, that's exactly why they impeached him. And a guy called me a Nazi. I mean, and I said, I'm not going to bother. I didn't even vote for Trump. I voted for Joe Jorgensen, you clown. But I said, look, you're insane and you need to get help. I mean, I'm not going to argue with somebody like that. You know, that's pointless. So, yeah, there's a lot of deranged leftists out there. They have Trump derangement syndrome. I mean, I liked some of what Trump did. I disliked some other stuff that he did. But when I look at
bump stocks.
When I look at the people who support Trump, as opposed to the people who oppose Trump, I see the working class versus the political class. And having written a book called Political Class Dismissed, I'm more sympathetic to those people than I am to the people who are opposing them. And really, the whole impeachment was about villainizing Trump supporters. There's nothing to do with the stupidest thing of all time. I mean, they had a somewhat inexperienced firm of attorneys went through the Harvard-educated House managers like a hot knife through butter. It was like Custer's Last Stand. So there was that was totally bogus. In fact, I said on my podcast, I think the impeachment was actually a crime. If you look at those federal statutes, but you know,
I know when we look through them, some of these things they get really infuriating because we know that they're breaking the law or they're crossing lines, you know, and it's like, when do we get justice in this country? And I'm gonna have to wrap it up here because we're out of time. You guys, Amazon is where you're going to go to find Jim's books. Follow him on find him on YouTube. Liberty Moving.
Yes.
That's the podcast. Yes. So you'll want to hear more from him there. He has such great information. I'm following him there. I asked him to be here today because he's such a leader in all of this. And I still got to ask you, don't let me forget what you thought about that joint resolution proposal I sent to you too. But that's another time. And thank you guys for tuning in this week. If you guys have any questions, send them to me. I'll send them to Jim, or you guys can find them yourself. And, let's keep supporting the Second Amendment. Let's keep fighting for our rights here. And let's get New York State back to a place that we can all be here, raise our families, and not be so worried about our futures. And thanks for tuning in next week. We'll have a great show for you again. And take care, guys.
Subscribe, like, and share Wake Up Wednesdays on YouTube and Facebook. Support our work at www.jgfamilyconsulting.com.